welcome back, everybody. Today we're taking a deep dive into something super relevant, really timeless too, war and peace as they're presented in the Quran.
Yeah, the Quran offers a perspective that people don't always get right, I think.
Right.
It tackles the realities of conflict, but at the same time, it's just so strong in advocating for peace.
Okay, so reading through the Quran, one thing that really jumped out at me was this idea of fighting in self-defense. It seems like the Quran says, yeah, sometimes war, it can't be avoided.
Totally. Absolutely. The Quran does say that believers are allowed to fight back when they're under attack or being oppressed.
Yeah.
But it's very specific about this. This is a very particular form of justice. And what's so fascinating is how much it stresses this idea of proportionality. Like, you only fight back to the same degree that you've been wronged, never more than that.
That's a really interesting point. So it's not about like revenge or making the violence worse, right?
Yeah.
It's more about restoring some kind of balance.
Exactly, that's it. And that actually ties into a bigger theme that you see throughout the Quran. Peace is the ultimate goal. You see verses about reconciliation, about forgiveness, even about being kind to people who have been your enemies.
So it's like, even if you're forced to fight, the point is always to get back to peace, to make things harmonious again.
Precisely. And the Quran, it doesn't shy away from what war is really like either. It even talks about how prisoners should be treated. And that's where you really see compassion shining through. There are clear instructions to treat prisoners humanely, to make sure they have food, clothing, and that they're treated with dignity.
I think it's pretty incredible how these teachings seem so ahead of their time. It's like setting a really high moral standard for how people should act even when they're in the middle of a war.
It speaks to this idea that Islam is meant to be a guide for every aspect of life, a complete way of living, offering guidance in every situation, even the toughest ones. And actually, I think it's worth looking at how the Quran guides interactions with people outside of the faith, especially in a world with so much diversity.
Yeah, that's a big one. What does it say about how to engage with people who have different beliefs?
Well, the Quran really stresses tolerance and interacting with respect. It says to be fair and just in all your interactions, no matter what someone believes. It even encourages cooperation and goodwill. It highlights the common good as something that can bring people of different faiths together.
So it's not about forcing your beliefs on others or creating divisions, right? It's more about finding shared values and working together.
Exactly. The Quran acknowledges that there are differences in faith, but it emphasizes our shared humanity as the basis for peaceful coexistence.
It's interesting how that keeps coming up, this idea of shared humanity. It seems to be really central to how the Quran looks at war and peace.
It really is. And I think one of the most powerful things the Quran does is to present these ideas not just as concepts, but as real-life things through the stories of the prophets.
You mean like how they dealt with challenges and conflicts, sometimes even having to go to war themselves?
Exactly. The Quran talks about prophets like Abraham, Moses, Jesus. They all faced situations where they needed strength, resilience, and a commitment to justice. And their stories, they show us how to hold on to our faith and principles in a really complex world.
So it's like learning from their examples, seeing how they handled those difficult situations.
Precisely. And of course, the Prophet Muhammad's life is the most complete example. He went through so many conflicts, and he always looked for peaceful solutions whenever he could. His life truly embodies what the Quran teaches about war and peace.
Yeah, his example seems to be really important for how to balance strength and compassion, how to uphold justice, but also work towards reconciliation.
Absolutely. The Quran isn't just some theory. It's meant to be a guide for life. And the Prophet Muhammad's life shows us that in action.
Okay, so we've talked about self-defense, pursuing peace, even how prisoners are treated. But there's one term I'm always curious about: jihad. It seems to be so often misunderstood.
Oh, absolutely. The word jihad itself, it literally means struggle or striving.
Yeah.
And it has a much wider meaning than just physical fighting.
So it's not just about fighting.
Exactly. There's something called the greater jihad, which refers to the struggle we have inside ourselves to fight against our own desires and temptations, the battle to be better people. And then there's the lesser jihad, which can involve armed struggle, but only in those very specific situations we talked about, the ones that are justified.
So actual fighting, it's just one small part of a much bigger idea.
Yeah.
And it seems like even then, the whole point is to create peace and justice.
You've got it. And it's really important to remember that the Quran clearly says there's no compulsion in religion. It's completely forbidden to force anyone to convert.
So it's about defending yourself and your community from being oppressed, not about making other people believe what you believe. That makes a lot of sense. But I am curious, what are the things that have to be true for armed struggle to even be allowed? Like, how does the Quran make sure that it's not just violence for no reason?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of how carefully the Quran approaches this. One condition is that it has to be the absolute last resort after every peaceful option has been tried. So it's about avoiding unnecessary bloodshed.
Right, so it's not about jumping into conflict, it's about trying everything else first.
Exactly. Another condition is that it has to be led by someone with legitimate authority. This stops individuals from just taking the law into their own hands.
Okay, so that helps to maintain order and prevent chaos.
Right. And maybe most importantly, the reason for fighting has to be to uphold justice, not for personal gain or revenge.
So your intentions have to be pure, focused on doing what's right, not on personal agendas.
That's it. And even then, the Quran says to use only as much force as is necessary, not to go overboard. Even in war, there are moral boundaries that you can't cross.
It's amazing how much thought and care went into making these guidelines. It's definitely not just a simple go fight kind of mentality.
Absolutely not. The Quran talks about protecting innocent lives, including women, children, and anyone who's not part of the fighting. It's about keeping that respect for human dignity, even when there's a conflict going on.
It seems like these teachings are trying to make war less brutal, more humane.
I think that's a fair point. And it goes back to the idea that Islam has a moral code for every part of life, even the most difficult ones.
This deep dive has been so helpful. It's amazing how the Quran addresses these really tough issues with such wisdom and compassion.
It really does give us a lot to think about. And I think for anyone who wants to understand Islam's view on war and peace, the key is to be open-minded and look at the details.
It's about looking at the whole picture, not just picking out certain verses or interpretations, right?
Exactly. The Quran shows us a way towards a more just and peaceful world. But to get there, it takes careful study, sincere reflection, and a commitment to living by its values.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've gone from the reasons why war might be justified to how absolutely important it is to work for peace. What I'm really taking away is this idea that even when there's conflict, the Quran is telling us to be restrained, to be compassionate, and to always try to do what's right.
I think that's a really powerful insight. And it sets the stage for us to explore some of the even harder parts of this topic, like reconciliation and forgiveness, which we'll get into next time.
I'm looking forward to that conversation. Join us then as we continue our deep dive into the Quran's teachings on war and peace.
Picking up from where we left off, one of the things that I find really powerful is how the Quran deals with what happens after a conflict. It's not just about stopping the fighting. There's this real emphasis on healing and rebuilding.
You mean reconciliation?
Yeah.
That seems like a lot to ask, especially when there's been so much pain and anger.
It's definitely tough, and the Quran acknowledges that, but it really pushes for forgiveness as the key to lasting peace. Choosing compassion over revenge, even when it's really, really hard.
So it's not about forgetting or saying what happened was okay, but finding a way to move forward without being stuck in that anger and resentment.
Exactly. It's about letting go of that burden for yourself and for the community. Because holding on to those negative feelings, it just keeps the cycle of pain and conflict going.
Yeah, that makes sense. But how does the Quran actually help us do that? Like, how do you even begin to forgive someone who's hurt you that badly?
Well, the Quran talks about the power of mercy. It encourages believers to be like God, to be merciful to others, even to those who have wronged them. It's a powerful reminder that we all mess up, and holding on to anger only ends up hurting us.
It seems like it takes so much strength to choose forgiveness, especially in those really tough situations.
It absolutely does. And the Quran recognizes that. It actually says that forgiveness is a sign of strength, not weakness. It's about rising above that desire for revenge, choosing a better way.
It's interesting how the Quran connects inner strength with peace. Like, you need that inner strength to truly forgive and work towards reconciliation.
I think you're right. And that speaks to how connected everything is in the Quran's teachings. It's not just about peace treaties and agreements. It's also about cultivating peace inside yourself. And that takes strength, self-awareness, and a commitment to letting go of negativity.
Yeah, it's almost like those two things have to go together. You can't have real peace in the world without some degree of inner peace.
You've got it. And that inner peace is something you have to constantly work on, especially when you're facing challenges and conflicts. And that's where the things we talked about before come in prayer, fasting, learning all those things.
Like they're tools for building that resilience and strength inside, which then helps you to deal with conflict and reconciliation in a more peaceful way.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that true peace starts from within and then spreads outwards. And that brings us back to this remarkable thing about the Quran. It focuses on treating everyone with dignity, even those who are different from you.
You mean how it talks about interacting with people of other faiths? I'm always amazed by how strongly it emphasizes tolerance and respect.
It's really at the core of Islamic teachings. The Quran tells us to be fair and just in all our dealings, regardless of what someone believes. It even encourages us to cooperate for the common good, recognizing that people of different faiths can still find things in common and work together.
So even if you don't agree on certain religious beliefs, there's still that shared humanity that connects us all.
Exactly. And the Quran clearly states that there's no compulsion in religion. Forcing someone to convert goes against the very idea of faith, which should be based on free choice and understanding.
Right, so it's more about building bridges and showing respect than trying to make others believe the same things you do.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that the Quran was revealed in a society that was already diverse, where people of different faiths were living and interacting with each other. So these teachings about tolerance and coexisting, they came from that real-world experience.
It wasn't just a nice idea, it was actually necessary for creating a peaceful and harmonious society.
Exactly. And I think those lessons are just as important today as we try to navigate a world that's more interconnected and diverse than ever.
Okay, we've talked about forgiveness, reconciliation, engaging with people of other faiths. But one question I've always had is, how does the Quran deal with the idea of justice? Especially when it comes to war and peace, justice has to be a big part of that, right?
You're absolutely right. Justice is a fundamental part of the Quran's teachings. It stresses fairness, equality, and protecting everyone's rights.
So it's not just about revenge or punishment then.
No, not at all. Justice in the Quran is a much bigger concept. It's about creating a society where everyone is treated fairly, where the vulnerable are protected, and everyone has a chance to do well.
So it's about making things equal, making sure everyone has an opportunity to succeed.
Exactly. And that ties back to the idea of peace, because the Quran recognizes that when there's injustice, it creates resentment, anger, and eventually conflict. So if you want lasting peace, you need a just society.
It's like without justice, there's always going to be that tension that could lead to violence.
Exactly. And the Quran talks about justice on both a societal level and an individual level. It encourages people to be just in their dealings with everyone, no matter their faith, their background, or their social status.
So it's about personal responsibility, making sure your actions are always fair and right.
That's it. And that applies even in conflict situations. The Quran says war should only be a last resort, and even then, the intention has to be to uphold justice.
So it's not about revenge or conquering, but about defending those who are oppressed and standing up against tyranny.
That's the heart of it. And even during war, the Quran sets clear ethical rules. Things like killing innocent civilians, destroying property, and acts of cruelty are forbidden.
It's like these guidelines are trying to bring some humanity and morality into even the most brutal situations.
I think that's a great point. The Quran recognizes that war is inherently chaotic and destructive. And it's trying to reduce that by stressing ethical behavior and putting justice above all else.
So even in war, there are limits, things you just don't do.
Absolutely. And that shows how deeply the Quran respects human dignity. That idea runs through all its teachings, whether it's about peace, war, reconciliation, anything.
It's like the Quran is trying to elevate the human spirit even in the toughest situations.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. It's about recognizing the worth of every human being, no matter our differences or the situations we find ourselves in.
It's interesting how all these ideas, justice, compassion, dignity, are so closely connected in the Quran.
It reflects the wholeness of Islam, how it offers guidance for all parts of life, not just the spiritual, but also the social, political, and even personal.
Like it's trying to create a blueprint for a just and compassionate society.
I like that. And I think that's something that gets lost sometimes in all the noise and misunderstandings about Islam. But when you really study the Quran, you see this incredible vision for a world built on peace, justice, and respect for everyone.
It's really given me a lot to think about. And I think this conversation has shown how complicated and nuanced these issues are. It's not about simple answers or black and white thinking.
I agree. It's about approaching these topics thoughtfully with an open mind and a willingness to deal with the complexity. And I think the Quran provides a really valuable framework for doing that.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive. We look at forgiveness, reconciliation, engaging with those of different faiths, and the essential role of justice. What really stands out to me is this connection between inner peace and outer peace, and how the Quran stresses cultivating both.
I think that's a key takeaway. Understanding that creating a more peaceful world starts with finding peace within ourselves.
It's about that personal change that then spreads outward, affecting our relationships, our communities, and ultimately the whole world.
Well said. And as we go into the final part of our deep dive, I think it's important to remember that the Quran doesn't pretend that achieving peace is easy. It offers a path, but it's a path that requires constant effort, both individually and together.
I'm looking forward to exploring that path further. Join us next time as we continue our deep dive into the Quran's teachings on war and peace, and look more closely at those challenges and complexities. So, as we get into this last part of our exploration, I'm thinking about everything we've talked about. From when war is justified to just how important it is to pursue peace. And it's clear, the Quran doesn't give us simple answers, It really digs into the complicated reality of human conflict.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's what makes the Quran's teachings so relevant, even today. It acknowledges that peace isn't just this thing that happens. You have to actively build it, work towards it. And that brings us to a really powerful idea, one that's often misunderstood. Peace as an act of creation.
Peace as an act of creation. That's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, the Quran doesn't just say peace is when there's no war. It describes it as this state of tranquility, of harmony, of well-being. These are qualities that we need to develop both inside ourselves and in our societies.
So it's not enough to just stop the fighting. You have to actually build something new and good in its place.
Exactly. And that takes action. It takes intention, a real dedication to changing how people think and feel. It means addressing the things that cause conflict in the first place, like injustice and inequality, and working to create a world where everyone feels valued and respected.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But it also sounds really hard. Like, where do you even start to create peace on such a big scale?
Well, the Quran stresses that it starts with each of us individually. It calls for this inner transformation, for purifying our hearts and making sure our actions line up with what's right. That's where those practices we talked about before come in. Prayer, fasting, seeking knowledge.
Right, like those are tools to help us build that inner peace so then we can approach the world from a more peaceful, more compassionate place.
Exactly. And that inner peace is crucial because the Quran makes it very clear. Building lasting peace takes more than just words. It takes a real change in how we treat each other.
So it's about changing hearts and minds, not just signing agreements.
Absolutely. And that's where the stories of the prophets are so powerful. They give us real examples of people who faced huge challenges and conflicts, but they always tried to live by those values of justice, compassion, and peace.
Like how they always looked for peaceful solutions first, how they showed mercy even to those who were against them.
Exactly. Well, Quran emphasizes that peace isn't about being passive or weak. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it takes strength and courage.
Yeah, it's that balance that we keep coming back to. Balancing strength with compassion, justice with forgiveness. It's not easy to do.
It's definitely not. And the Quran recognizes that. It's a constant effort, a striving towards something better. But it's worth it because the rewards of peace are huge for individuals and for whole societies.
I think one of the most important things I'm taking away from all this is that peace isn't just some perfect state we hope for. It's something we actively create through what we do, what we intend, and our commitment to living by the values the Quran teaches.
And it's a creation that needs all of us to take part, no matter our faith or background, because in the end, the Quran's message of peace speaks to something deep inside all of us. That desire for harmony, for understanding, for a world where we can all live together with dignity and respect.
It's a message that feels so important now, with all the division and conflict we see in the world.
Absolutely. But it's also a message of hope. The Quran reminds us that even in the darkest times, peace is still possible. We just have to choose it, to commit to building a better future for ourselves and for the generations to come.
This deep dive into the Quran's teachings on war and peace has been incredible. It's made me rethink some things, expanded my understanding, and I feel inspired to work for a more peaceful world.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you, and I hope everyone listening feels encouraged to learn more about what the Quran teaches, to think about the complexities, and to discover the wisdom and beauty it holds.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of the Quran's message. Until next time, may peace be with you all.
And with you.